Welcome to the Tricord Advisors podcast, where we answer life's hard questions to help you make smart decisions with your money. I'm Jeremiah Lee, and this is Randy Barkley. We're both certified financial planners. I'm also a California licensed attorney.
You know, at the start of this year, they passed the Secure Act 2.0. So that means obviously it's supposed to be better. But what it did is it kind of gave cover for employers. So employers now can, when they're signing up new employees or signing up a new plan, they can opt in. In other words, the employer doesn't have to give an option to the employee whether or not you want to participate in this 401k plan, right? So the employers kind of has this cover from this new Secure 2.0 Act that they can automatically opt in employees. And employees have to opt out, or else they're automatically in the plan.
And some of them, I believe it's an initial opt-in, but also there can be elevators throughout the time to say you may come in at maybe 3%, they may get bumped up to 4% and 5% to get to a savings level. And I mean, I think the government is trying to take this step because they're acknowledging the importance of retirement plans for our community, for our country. I mean, years ago, it was a private employer would provide pensions. Think of Boeing or Hershey or something. They would provide these great pensions that would take care of their own employees. Well, with the advent of the 401k, it kind of shifted that burden a little bit from the company needing to be the one to do this to each individual having an opportunity through their company plan, but having an opportunity to fund their own accounts. And if people don't fund them appropriately, if they don't opt in, we get a whole generation that can get to retirement and really be in a hard spot. They just have Social Security.
And I think there is a whole generation. I think the baby boomers, my generation, we started with 401ks, or the generation of my parents. They had pensions and they had other income sources, but the baby boomers starting in the late 70s, early 80s, 401ks started to really diminish, and less companies were offering those kind of benefits. Social Security was never meant to replace all of your income. And unfortunately, as we know from all the studies we've looked at and the people that we interface with, sometimes Social Security is all they've got, right? And it was never meant to be more than about a 40% replacement of your income when you stepped into retirement.
Right. And a safety net, right? There's a safety net so everyone could be okay. Not that you'd be relying on that. So we think of retirement plan, that's kind of what we're talking about today, based on this push, with the Secure Act 2.0 of the government trying to, I guess, encourage everyone to get involved, to encourage companies to opt in their folks, to get everyone participating so that these next generations are better. When we think of retirement plan, we have a lot of folks, and this gets me excited. When we get retirement planning, this is where people come in to our firm thinking about retirement. They're either younger and they say, what should I be saving? I want a retirement I'm excited about. Or they're right at retirement and say, well, I've done a number of things, but where do I go from now? Where do I go from here? And that retirement planning question, it's part math. It's also part emotions of how you feel about transitioning out of work. But a lot of it, you use this analogy a lot in the past, is kind of like farming, to say you have a crop in 1 year, and if you just eat all that, it's gone. You're done. You have nothing for the next year. But if you set aside a certain amount of seed, and then that next season you plant it, you deploy it, that's what brings you that next crop the next year.
And there's always a risk when you let go of the money. And again, it goes back to the conversation when we have we're sitting down with somebody who's just kind of starting out in their adult life, what I call it. And I'm trying to encourage them to put in, 5%, 7%, 10%. And they look at me and say, I can't even put the ends together. And you're asking me to save, something I don't have. And my response is, yeah, you do. You need to do that, because time, whatever that time issue is, you're going to look back at it and you're going to say, I wish that I did.
Yeah.
And you're going to regret that you didn't take advantage of the time, because as we know, time is really, really generous for investing, right?
For investing, that's right. It grows. And to that comment, I mean, there's so many folks, I think, who feel, hey, when I make a little more, then I will, do X, Y, or Z. And that's some people do, but that is a really hard struggle, because as soon as you start making a little more, well, that thing we never upgraded with the house, and you have this car that we're barely holding together, and you never get to it. So, I mean, at its core, a lot of the financial planning is saying, what can I do today, whatever that age is, that's going to benefit my future, knowing or anticipating that someday I'm going to work less, whether it's going down to part-time, whether it's, completely retiring. And I use the analogy a lot, kind of with either sports or theater or a movie, even, to say, if you had to watch one quarter or one portion of a movie or of a sports game, especially, which one would you watch? The answer is always the fourth quarter. Like, that's the most interesting. That's the most exciting. We just came out from March Madness, and there's so many games that the last few seconds even are the most exciting. And so for people to say, that when they hit retirement, it's not like the game's over, not like they're done, not like they're going to go out into the pasture. I mean, all those analogies from years ago, I think, are really unfortunate. They're not helpful. But to say, this is the fourth quarter, this is the time when everything you've done throughout your whole life and building and all the good plays, all the good moments, this is what they're building towards to really finish well. And some of that takes some planning. And that's a lot of what we do, is put numbers to that.
And I look at it as discipline. Going back to the farming illustration, it takes discipline to be a good farmer. You can't, and just to give a biblical reference, Proverbs is full of stories about the lazy farmer, or the person who doesn't take care of the things when they need to take care of them. Because when calamity strikes, when the thing comes at you and you're unprepared for that, you're unprepared for whatever that is. For us, we're talking about, you're unprepared for that time when you either step into retirement, you've lost your job, disability, death in some cases. People are not prepared for it because they have not taken the necessary steps to protect themselves, more importantly. Now, again, we're not talking about extreme wealth. What we're talking about is being consistent with providing for your future economic needs, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, so much. Well, we can put a few numbers just as a rule of thumb. We'll probably talk a little bit what the retirement planning really looks like. But I mean, for a lot of folks, say someone's in their 20s, or maybe let's just give them 30. They just started their first real job, their first real career. And often we get the question, what should I be doing with retirement? How much do I need to put in? And a lot of that, especially in the financial planning world, starts with all these assumptions. What do you assume inflation will be? What do you assume your rate of return is going to be? And candidly, most people have no idea. They don't.
It's really a shot in the dark. It really is. We don't know. I mean, I've been in this business for over 40 years, and I've seen just about every economic travail, I guess, ups and downs that you could possibly imagine over that period of time. The one thing I can tell you for assurance, though, is that the world didn't end. I mean, it still continues.
Yeah, it's interesting how many times have you lived through moments. I mean, this wasn't a big one, but Y2K, everyone thought everything was going to melt down. It was a recent one, but there's much bigger ones that you lived through. I was saying the world appeared to be on the brink, and yet we've endured. But with that, I mean, part of what I feel that good advice to the 30-year-old is just get started. It doesn't have to be the perfect number. It doesn't have to be the best number, but just get started and make it part of your regular budget. Yeah,
and again, I mean, what I have found is that through the years working with people who tell me they don't have the extra money, I said, I kind of believe the emotions. I said, okay, let's analyze this. So we go through and we do a very specific budget for their life. And every time, Jeremiah, there's never been a time where I could come up and say, oh, you're right, you don't have any money left over. But when I do the actual budget and I really go through the hard numbers, everybody has extra money. It's how they choose to spend their money that's the most important. And we've talked about it. People went, oh, I've got an extra $50 a month, I'm going to go do this. Or I get an extra $100 a month, I'm going to go do that. Or then they leverage themselves, right? They go buy something and they pay this exorbitant interest, either on a credit card, or they buy a new car, or just things like, they're just not making good choices because their personal desires get ahead of the practical aspects of what they should be accomplishing in their lives.
That's a great comment. I think there's some real wisdom in saying you got to enjoy some of your money. There's got to be joy in the process. What's the a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down, right? There's bits of that. However, there's some hard medicine at times to say, okay, if you're 30 and you have this job, you have these goals and ambitions to maybe buy a house, and maybe something they're working towards. Well, if you start also saving for retirement, that house is going to take longer. You're going to have to delay that gratification. However, that is a much better function for your future to be doing both. And I tell people a lot that it's a both and function, not do I save for a house or do this, or, you kind of have to do both and keep moving and move that prudently. And, there's some folks that will say, putting 7% into their retirement seems nice, but for a lot of people, 15% is a really good rule of thumb of keeping on track for retirement.
So how do we determine what is the right savings rate?
Mm.
You know, somebody comes to me and says, well, how much should I set aside? I mean, it seems like I'm putting away $10 a month. Doesn't seem like it's very practical.
Yeah. And if there was a number that was just a number for everybody, it would be blasted all over the internet. And there's rules of thumb, 10%, 15%, what you can afford, a couple $100. But really what we do is the planning side to say everyone's income picture in retirement and later in life, as well as their expenses, is different. And even just as we think through it, like, you're going to have some sort of retirement income, a qualified account, a 401k, an IRA. There's something like that. There's probably going to be some Social Security that you'll have.
Right.
There's probably going to be some sort of a pension or an annuity or something. Like anyone who's a teacher or works for a city or a government agency, they're going to have a pension. So that's part of it. Part-time work. I mean, it used to be years ago that people would think to retire. I have this moment, I'm done. But man, with remote work, and I think people just acknowledging that they don't want to sit on a porch and rock after they've retired, finding something that's an enjoyable part-time job, I think is the new dynamic of retirement. We've had a number of folks, especially engineers, who finish out their career, but then they come back as a consultant,
right? And
they have another 4 or 5 years where they're working and making not as much as they used to, but really good money still. And they enjoy it. They love solving problems. They love being involved in a team, but they don't have the burden of going in, 40 hours a week. And to them, that builds a new future. So that's on the income side, or the income side. The expense side is the one that's unique per person. What does it cost to run your household? Have you paid off your house? What trips do you want to take with your spouse? There's a number of things, and we'll talk a little more in the next section on the specifics of this, but it's very unique person to person of what they're going to need in retirement, and therefore what they need to be planning for.
And what we're going to talk about in the next is that there actually is documentation now that having a financial planner for a wealth management adds incredible value. And we've actually got some verification of this now with a lot of studies that have been done over the last several decades, that having a proper advice adds significant value to your economic outcome. We'll return. We'll talk more about this in our next segment.